Well, hello and welcome to Smart Impressions. I'm Rachel. And if you have ever thought or forgot to think about the most underestimated component of a trade show, a booth stand, then you are going to love today's show. It's called Design to Attract or Just Impress. And we want to know all about design impact behind the booth. And I want to extend that into what do they do with these booth items after the show? What's happening about the sustainable conversation that needs to be discussed? We're going to bring it to you today, live on all our platforms. I want to welcome our guest today, a 38-year veteran to the industry, all about booth designs, Al Mercuro. Thank you for joining us. He's strategic marketing advisor at Genesis, and he's going to bring a lot of knowledge to this conversation today.
Oh, thank you, Rachel. I have a lot to live up to right now. So.
Well, clearly you have a ton of experience and I love this conversation. I'm so delighted that you're here to join me because I know sustainability has been a conversation and really a driving force for you, especially when it comes to these booths that go up for a couple days and then gone the next. What really resonated with you around this topic that we could really explore today?
It's to see the waste that goes on the trade show floor is just astonishing to me. And here in the U.S., from years ago, we've always looked at things not from a sustainability point of view, but from a more economic point of view, I guess, in the fact that we always offered a rental solution to clients when they only had a one-off show or something like that to do. Whereas in Europe and in Asia, they do something called a build and burn type of thing, which is sort of my pet peeve, that they'll build an exhibit for one event and literally throw it away into a landfill after the event's over. And to me, that is just a waste of money. It's a waste. It's impacting the environment at the same time. So it's been sort of a passion of mine. Our company started actually building exhibits back in 2008 with recycled materials. And as the years gone by, the problem was initially the cost factor was an issue to people in this area. The cost was more to build an exhibit that way than it was to build a traditional build. And those costs came down about 2019. So that roadblock was not there anymore. But yet some of the people that we were dealing with, our clients, still didn't seem to be that interested in dealing with recycled built exhibits. So I just took a different approach at that time. I said, well, it doesn't matter if the client's interested. Let's just start building things this way. If there's not going to be a cost difference, let's just start building things the way that they should be built. And which led me to get more involved with the EDPA, which is the Experiential Design Association for our industry. And our sustainability committee, I've been a part of now for 3 years, and we helped write the standards, the guidelines, about 1.5 years ago, which we're sharing now within the industry to help everyone sort of decide to build exhibits this way within the exhibit building industry.
Well, I love this. There's no doubt it should be top priority. Building exhibition stands with recycled materials. The reality is it doesn't affect the way it looks, right? Too much. You're not going to
No,
see
you
this.
you could never you would never tell the difference.
I mean,
Yeah.
and that's really the core of it. Why not be sustainable if you could still be effective? So let's get down to business. I mean, there's clearly a big part of our audience today, and I do encourage you to ask questions to Al. He's been doing this for a long time, and people really overlook the booth. You've gone through that. You can tell us more about how easily it is to overlook. What kind of does it really matter what your booth looks like if people are just going to be walking the show floor anyway?
Yes, it does. Obviously, there's a lot of competition on the show floor in terms of, everyone's trying to attract attention to their space. So it's very competitive, and it's like showbiz in a way. You have to kind of stand out, and what makes you stand out. And basically, when you design a booth, you have to think about, I guess, the human part of it, of the attendee, when they're walking by with so much stuff going on the show floor. What's going to grab their attention more, and what a lot of exhibitors forget is they either put too much information on the booth. Back in the 90s, I would tell our clients, these aren't bulletin boards, these are billboards on a highway. and you need to attract attention with a big image, not a lot of small images, not a lot of words, and you have only 5 to 10 seconds to do that. And the key is to get people to be drawn to your booth space, and it's then up to the staff to take over from there, which is a thing that a lot of exhibitors don't realize is just training their staff properly is very important. That should be almost the important thing you do, because that's where the conversation starts. That's when you're kind of filling in the blanks, to people, but you've drawn them in with the booth. And a lot of companies will tend to spend a lot of money on an exhibit, and they'll forget those little details of what it is important for people once they're drawn into the booth. How experiential do you want to make it, especially with Gen Zs today? They're all about being part of the sort of the experience. They want to be part of something, and you have to think about that when you design a booth as well.
Well, let's talk about a couple of the things that you've seen that you're like completely, flabbergasted when you see. I mean, I've seen everything. You see these big stands. You see sometimes private areas that people are having meetings. You have other areas where it's completely open floor, and maybe even intimidating for people to walk onto their stands because it's too. You feel very vulnerable in that. Each one of them kind of evokes kind of some kind of emotional response. But what are some of your pet peeves that you kind of don't like, you're not very fond of when you see on the show floor when clients tend to come to you asking to do things that maybe doesn't really work for them?
The size of their booth space is important. I mean, some folks, if they start off with a small space, like a 10 by 10 basic space, they want to push too much into the booth space, and unfortunately, it's not going to work. You have to kind of pare down a little bit more. I mean, even as basic as when somebody gets a booth space here in the U.S., they give them a little table, they give them 2 chairs. I tell them, get rid of the table and chairs. You're creating a barrier for people not to kind of come into your booth space at that point. So you want to keep an open space, which you mentioned earlier. That's important on that. But it's the little things you do. Again, the booth staffing. It's even the giveaway items. Thinking ahead. Again, that's another pet peeve of mine is people give out these cheap pens, maybe, for example. And in the sustainability aspect, the worst thing you can do is give out a cheap pen with your logo on it, and it breaks like within a week, and you're throwing it in the garbage, and it's a waste at that point. We had one client that decided they needed to reach 25 of their key accounts at the show. They wanted to make sure 25 of their key accounts came to visit them at the booth. So instead of spending thousands of dollars on a bunch of thousands of cheap pens, they bought 25 really expensive pens, and they sent the top of the pen to the 25 key accounts before the show and tell them to come by their booth space to get the rest of the pen, and all 25 showed up, and they were all able to engage with all 25 of those key accounts. So it's that strategic thinking of, it's one thing, yeah, you can give away a lot of cheap stuff, but if it's not thought out and not planned enough in advance, it's not going to work if you don't do that.
Yeah, I think so. A lot of times we just see businesses that are like, oh, well, this is kind of, what we do. But I think a lot of people are spending so much money. I mean, trade show marketing is one of the most expensive form of marketing there is, but it doesn't all translate into engagement and the conversion. Where do you see some of the biggest budgets being wasted when it comes to the design and functionality?
Right now, the biggest thing is technology in terms of like big LED screens, which are great to see at a show. But if the content on the LED screen is not there, if there's not a clear message being sent, with the content that you have, then it's just a big TV screen that you have in the booth space. It's not doing anything. So the intent is, if you're going to use technology, make sure you use it properly and make sure you have a message that you can convey with that.
Okay. I mean, I've seen, what about, there's a lot of, I see some exhibits where they're doing demos on stands, loud speaking kind of engagements happening, in a noisy show. It can be very conflicting to really get your messaging across. Do you feel like those are really good ways, or are there better ways to mitigate kind of the engagement aspect of it? Or is being the loudest really the most effective?
Well, fortunately or unfortunately, there are some rules. I don't know about Europe and Middle East, but in U.S., you cannot go beyond the booth space with sound. So you have to really keep that in mind when you're designing that. I think the senses are an overlooked part of exhibiting, appealing to all the senses, even smell, taste, sound. Those are all part of creating an environment that you want people to have a memory of. And it's, if you're at a food show, it's easy because you can give away samples of food. But there are some, I think in Europe, they do things a lot better in terms of hospitality and creating more of a relaxed feeling within the booth space. They have more time to do that. There's more sit down areas for relaxing and getting to know their clients better. US, it's much faster. They're turning over people quickly, or there's not a sit down kind of atmosphere there. So that's a concern, I think, for people again here in the U.S. to think about the wellness, the hospitality aspect. Wellness is a big thing in terms of all that stuff you're experiencing at a show. I think not enough time is given to that wellness aspect. That people need time to kind of chill a little bit and relax. I think that's an important aspect as well.
Absolutely. I mean, I can't tell you how many shows I've been to, and you're searching for a chair, right? People are exhausted. They're on their feet all day, and there's just nowhere to sit unless you go to one of the food and beverage outlets so you can take a break. And even then, it's about high turnover. So these businesses can survive and really profit
Hmm.
through the large amount of visitors that are there those limited days. But God, I didn't even think about that, the wellness aspect of it. But I'm always going, where's a chair when you need one?
Yeah,
It's
well,
trying
and
to find.
that's a two-sided type of thing too, because you could have somebody sitting in your booth there that you don't want to be sitting in your booth for a long time,
True.
and so if you make it too comfortable, it may not work in your favor at that point. But in Europe,
Absolutely.
they seem to kind of got that down. They kind of know how to do that well, and all that.
Yeah, and of course.
Accessibility is also a hot topic right now. It
Okay.
should always have been. But Panasonic somebody sent me a picture of the Panasonic booth this year at CES, and were promoting, which I've never seen before, all the accessibility aspects of their design of their exhibit. And to me, that was kind of a welcoming sign that they kind of identified that they did one design the booth with accessibility to begin with, but they also used it to promote it to make people aware that they did that.
And
And
were you
go ahead.
referring to wheelchairs like accessibility or?
Not just wheelchairs. It could be for the deaf, somebody that needs sign language or something like that. Those are just little things that you need to take into account. That when you design a booth and you have a second story like a double decker, um, that's not accessible. So you
Yeah.
got to make sure there's a second conference room downstairs so that it makes it easier for those folks with wheelchairs that they can still be part of a conference and not have to go upstairs. But yeah, I've yet to see an elevator in a double decker booth, so that hasn't happened yet. So
Well, that's gonna be a fun, sustainable conversation once you do see it, you know? Well, this is a quick one where we just get bite size of information, and your expertise and knowledge is invaluable. So I want to get right to some of the 3 tips that our audience can really think about next time they're designing their booth. Obviously, a lot of people give it to third parties to come up with a solution, but I do think that if we are aware of some of the top 3 things for people to engage to drive meaningful conversations, we're going to be more empowered to have those better results in the future. So what do you got, Al, for us? What are those top 3 tips to design a booth, and what should we be looking at?
well, as mentioned before, clarity, I guess, of what your message is at the booth. And for example, years ago, there was a company that, and knowing your audience, I guess, too, is part of that. Um, this was a show for car parts, for auto body kind of guys to go to. And this company made windshield repair kits. That's what they did for a living. I guess that was their thing, and they knew their audience were these auto mechanic kind of guys, and just putting the name of their company at the top of the booth wasn't really going to draw somebody's attention into that booth space. So they just simply put windshield repair kits as instead of their company name. And
Okay, clear.
they're kind of hitting people over the head. And again, they knew their audience. This is what they, if a guy needed windshield repair, this is the booth you need to go to. So again, clarity is kind of important, to make sure you know the audience and you get your message across that way.
Cool. We got clarity, know your audience. What else? I know accessibility is probably number two in there.
Yeah, attraction, having people have an experience within the booth space, something that they will remember once they go through, whether it's gamification, whether it's creating some kind of trajectory path, quiz kind of thing that you can do inside the booth space, to gather information, to get people engaged more in what's going on there, and not just coming in and just hearing a sales pitch. So.
Fantastic. Yeah, that's going to be definitely engaging for sure. And one more, what else do you got?
I guess the attraction itself of the booth in terms of designing color, using technology, getting accessibility, as I mentioned earlier, into the booth space, just designing the space with more intent, knowing your audience, even getting down to dress code. I mean, what your booth staff wears in a booth is important. Kind of knowing your audience. If you're wearing a suit and tie and this is a sports related show, you want to be more casual. You want to dress equal to the attendees that are going to be there. So.
Amazing. All right. Well, those are some good tips. I mean, I think we could get a lot more than 3. There's no doubt. And I just want to plug, don't forget sustainability aspect. I know a lot of suppliers may not be having this on the radar, but I would like to encourage people we're looking out for this one planet we're living on. And I do think it's worth a discussion to talk about this with your suppliers, whoever it may be that's building your exhibit space, and how they're going to reuse some of the material that is being used. Would you agree?
I agree, and I don't mind if you don't mind sharing with your audience my guidelines that I worked on with the EDPA.
Absolutely,
is definitely something I think both the exhibit building industry as well as the exhibitor needs to be addressing more. So.
Absolutely. And I appreciate that. We're going to share it with all of our audience so you can click it and check out these guidelines that will help everybody. And this is why you've been listed as Eventex named 100 most influential people in the last couple of years. And really, I can't thank you enough for your expertise, Al. It's delightful to have you here on Smart Impressions, where people are unlocking business relationships one connection at a time in the trade show space. So thank you so much for being here and being a great guest.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thank you.
Absolutely. Well, this show is proudly sponsored by the Biz Angels, which are your outsourced lead generators. If you need to get your marketing qualified leads to sales meetings and do it effectively, because those people on the stand are the most valuable people besides the booth. So do let us know if you need some support. Other than that, reach out with your questions to Al, download his guidelines, and make sure your next trade show is as sustainable and effective as it can be. I wish you the best business success. Until the next time, we'll see you later at Smart Impressions. Have a beautiful